All right. Hello and welcome to day 7 of Data Reuse Days 2025. I'm Ifra. I'm a product manager here at Wikimedia Deutschland, and we have a full agenda today. We're going to start off with the Wikidata query service. Where are we? Where is it going? And the speakers are Guillaume, David, and Lydia. And after that, we're going to move on to a session using Wikidata to provide background information to application users by Andrea. And then lastly, we're going to finish up with WikiFlix, the free video streaming portal by Magnus. And before I hand over to Lydia, just going to say again that Q&A is always at the end of the session. So you're free to always write the questions in the chat, but we won't get to them until the speakers are through with their presentations. All right. I would say that we can just get started, and I'm going to hand over to Lydia.
Thank you very much. Welcome everyone to the Wikidata Query Service session. We're going to talk about where we are with the Wikidata Query Service and where things are going. I'm here with Guillaume and David, who will join me for the Q&A after I've presented a quick update on where we are. So if you have questions, as Ifra was saying, please put them in the chat and we can get to them during the Q&A. So let's start with a bit of background on the Wikidata Query Service for those of you who might not be super familiar with it. The Wikidata Query Service is a very critical part of Wikidata, and it is the main way to query Wikidata and unlock the relationships that are in the data in the Wikidata the knowledge graph. So it is one way of truly unlocking the power that is in Wikidata. It's currently running a software called BlazeGraph. Who is using Wikidata Query Service? A lot of people. On the one hand, it's Wikidata editors who are using it as part of their editing workflows. It's knowledge seekers and sharers who post stuff on social media, like in the screenshot here, a query for the popes who were children of other popes, because that's a thing. But also small and medium-sized reusers like WikiFlix, which we will hear about later today, or Graph Directory. And of course, tool builders who are building tools around Wikidata for the editors, such as Listeria or Integrality. So that's just to show you that the Wikidata Query Service is pretty important. Now, let's talk a bit about the scale of the query service. Wikidata Query Service is one of the largest SPARQL endpoints that is available on the internet. It currently holds about 16.6 billion triples, which are coming from about 115 million items with 1.64 billion statements on them, plus a smaller number of properties and lexeme triples. And Wikidata is right now edited about 450,000 times per day, and that means that amount of changes also in the Wikidata Query Service. And we're seeing about 7,000 to 8,000 requests per minute to the query service, either from manual queries on query.wikidata.org or from tools and scripts and similar. Now, as some of you might know, the Wikidata Query Service has been struggling a bit, and there are three main challenges to the query service. One is keeping up with the data size. Wikidata is growing very large. Another one is keeping up with the query and write load. So every time Wikidata gets edited, it needs to be done in the query service as well. There are a lot of applications querying the query service. So keeping up with that is the second challenge. And the third challenge that we face is keeping the system stable and secure, given the above two challenges. Now, we have worked on improving the situation for quite some time now, and I wanted to give you an update on what we have done lately to address the problems around the query service, and then talk about what comes next. What have we done lately? We've continued to build out the Wikibase ecosystem. So the Wikibase ecosystem is basically the idea that not all of the data has to live in Wikidata, but we're talking about linked open data. So let's use the software that is running Wikidata and use it in other, use it to run other Wikidata-like wikis as well that host other open data that's not necessarily has to be in Wikidata. And we've gotten that to the point where it's becoming a really viable and good place to host your data as well, if it's not right for Wikidata. We have created a developer portal. You can find it at Wikidata for developers to help people who are building applications and who are reusing the data to find the best way to get to the data, because Wikidata has a lot of APIs and data access methods, and the query service is just one of them, but it's the most it's one of the most used ones, and not always the right one for every use case. We've also developed a new Wikibase REST API, which is now available in version 1 to offer people a meaningful alternative to some queries. And if you want to know more about the REST API, there was a session earlier in the data reuse days that you can watch. We've also released the new language code for multiple languages that will help reduce the amount of redundant data that is in Wikidata. So for example, the name of a person across different languages with the same writing system, and so on. And already, since this has been introduced, about 10 million items had their labels migrated, labels and aliases migrated to this new language code. So that's quite a good step forward in reducing the amount of data in Wikidata that doesn't have to be there because it's redundant data. There was also quite a bit of community testing and benchmarking of some of the alternative backends that are out there besides BlazeGraph, and results are being shared on Wiki, which is really great. So you're free to have a look at that and see which of the other options might be on the table for the future and how they stack up. We also have worked on setting up and testing the graph split, which I will get to in more detail later. And we have exposed the RDF update stream publicly. So this is the stream that you need to basically keep a query service in sync with all the edits happening on Wikidata itself. And it is one of the things needed for someone else to set up their own query service or set up a query service for you outside query.wikidata.org. We've also done a lot of research into the currently available data access methods, APIs, and so on, and how we can improve them, what's working for them, what's not. The result of that, we presented preliminary results of that we presented at the beginning of the data reuse days, and on the first day, again, you're welcome to watch the session on that to find the details. And we've done research to better understand the makeup of the data in Wikidata, better understand the existing queries that people are making, and more. So just to give you one of the things we found while looking at the makeup of the data in Wikidata over time. So here you can see how the number of items on Wikidata has grown since the beginning in 2012. Now, that alone is already pretty helpful, but we said, okay, but not all parts of Wikidata grew in the same rate and at the same speed. Let's look at how they are made up. So we looked at how did the number of items grow when you look just at items that have a link, a site link to Wikipedia or one of the other Wikimedia projects. So basically the very core of the items in Wikidata. And then we looked at what we call glue items. So those are the items that are needed for those items that are connected to Wikipedia. So to connect them and so on, to add additional data on them and so on. And you can already see the growth curve for that looks very different compared to the overall growth curve. Then we looked at, okay, how does the largest subpart of Wikidata's data stack up to that? And that is scholarly articles. Again, here you can see how that developed over time. And then we looked at the second, at another very large part, which is astronomical objects, and how that developed over time. So that should give you a good understanding of where the growth of Wikidata has been happening over the last years. Now, let's look at what's coming up next. In the short and longer term, there are 3 directions that we're working on. One is offering alternative ways to access the data. Not everything that's currently using the query service needs it. So we can offer better alternatives for the stuff that doesn't need the query service to get load of the query service. The second part is getting the amount of data under control. So this is more work around reducing redundant data, for example. And last but not least, finding alternatives for a better future. So under the umbrella of offering alternative ways to access the data, we have worked on the REST API. There's more work to be done there to make it even more useful and usable for more use cases. We have gotten requests for subset dumps so that it's easier to work with the dumps instead of one of the APIs. Yeah, so we will continue to look into those and work on those. Then we have the data access methods research that we started and that we need to wrap up. And we're working on outreach to developers to, among other things, make it easier to understand and know when to use which way, which data access method, and when to use the query service over another one. Then, under the umbrella of getting the amount of data under control, we will continue to build out the Wikibase ecosystem and make it a really strong home for data that doesn't belong into Wikidata. We'll continue to reduce or support the editors in reducing the amount of redundant data that we have. One of the things on the table there are automated descriptions. There is work on RC to work on a mass editing policy, so to basically give the administrators a tool at hand to understand which types of mass edits are okay to do, which are not, and so on. And later, probably also look at the notability policy as it currently stands and how that might be refined. And which is what we're doing now, splitting the graph in the query service so that one individual query service has less data to deal with. What does that mean? So the graph split is going to be disruptive but necessary change to keep Wikidata query service up and running. We are right now in a transition phase that has been going on for several months, where we offer both systems, and we're going to switch over currently planned for end of March 2025. So what is happening is right now we have Wikidata as the wiki, and all of its data is replicated into one Wikidata query service, one BlazeGraph instance. And we're switching to a model where Wikidata's data is split into two. One is most of the data in Wikidata into one Blazegraph instance, one query service, and scholarly articles in a second query service. So that means editing remains in the same wiki, but queries, if you want to write a query that touches scholarly articles, you will need to adapt it and combine data from these two Blazegraph instances. If your query does not touch scientific articles, you're fine and nothing should change for you. Now we looked a bit at the impact of this graph split and the graph split that it will have. So what we did was take a sample of about 110,000 queries from Q3 last year and analyze, okay, which of those queries even touch scientific articles? And it was about 8%. And then of those queries, how many tools or user agents are behind this? And the result of that you can see in this graph, which is that a single tool, unfortunately, was responsible for 72.2% of all the queries that touch scientific articles on the query service in this time. And that's a lot. What is even more interesting is when we reached out to the person developing the tool, it was basically just a test, and they weren't even very concerned about it no longer working in the future and adapting it to the graph split. So that was good to know for us, because that already removes quite a lot of the worry we had. The third largest tool would be slightly affected, but can be adapted easily. And we're currently working with the second largest tool to support them in adapting queries and figuring out what the future of the tool looks like. So that brings me to the third topic, which is finding a better alternative, or finding alternatives for a better future. There is a lot of testing of alternative backends going on in the community already, and benchmarking of the different interesting query service backends that could be an alternative. And you can find the information about the details of that on Wiki. But long-term, somehow we have to move off of Blazegraph, because Blazegraph is unfortunately not maintained anymore, and that becomes more of a problem every day. Now, the question is, how can you help if you would like to? You can help rewrite queries that will be affected by the graph split. And some of that could, for example, happen on Wikidata request a query, where people help each other to write queries. If you're more technically inclined, then test some of the alternative backends. But also, if you're just running queries that are a bit special out there, do try them on some of the available public endpoints, and give the creators of those backends, of those new potential alternative backends, feedback, so that they can help, that they can use that as a way to improve the backend and make it really work for us for Wikidata. You can also help adapt tools and queries that you have that would be affected by the upcoming graph split. If you don't have any of them, that's of course great, but if you do, please adapt them or help others adapt their queries if you're able to. And it would be great if you also help with migrating redundant labels and aliases to the new more language code, so that we reduce the amount of redundant data that we have in Wikidata. And with that, thank you very much for your attention. And Guillaume and David and I are here to answer any question related to the query service you might have, hopefully.
There is already one question from Andy in the chat. I'm just going to read that out and you all can take over. They're saying comments on mass editing notability policies suggest a desire to reduce the number of items or at least significantly slow the growth. Is this so?
I would say being more intentional about what we're doing on Wikidata, because one of the problems people brought to me is also like, if a bot operator is importing something that maybe is not the right thing to do, like adding a lot of redundant labels or descriptions and so on, then right now there isn't much of a policy they have at hand to really say, no, this is not okay. And that, I think, needs to change so that it's a more intentional conversation about what do we as a community actually want. We have more questions. Camilo.
My question is a bit lateral to the query service, but still regarding, because one of the things that has been highlighted in this presentation is that one of the good things to do to improve the situation with the query service is remove redundant data. This was a thing that was also discussed at Wikimania. We created the Wiki project redundancy to list a lot of things that are about this. And a bit after Wikimania, I remember that mainly in the Telegram chat emerged also a concern about the sustainability not of the query service, but also of Wikidata itself, that was also summarized in this essay by Amir. And it was said that also doing massive removals of redundant data could cause the collapse of Wikidata in another way. So not of the query service, because it would be good for the query service, but it would cause the collapse of Wikidata itself. And so I wanted to ask if there has been further research on this, and how much massive removals of redundant data, like, for example, references to Wikipedia for statements that have also other more reliable references, is good or is bad, because we have had no updates on these, and so also knowing this would be interesting to know if performing such massive removals could be overall good or overall not good. Thanks.
Yeah, very good point. Both. So that's definitely something we're working on as well, together with Ifra and her team, for example. So that's definitely something that's also on the table and that's being looked at. I think one of the really big things we need to avoid is large-scale edit wars, for example, where one bot adds labels in all the languages, and then 5 minutes later, other bot comes and moves everything to mol. And then they edit war each other across thousands of items. That's really not helpful. Quite the opposite. So I think that's where I would definitely start. And again, try to be more intentional about where are we moving and not doing conflicting stuff across Wikidata. And I know this is hard and it's not even intentional. It just happens. But that's also part of why we're working, for example, on the mass editing policy RC, right? To have a conversation about that. Okay, that's stuff to be avoided.
Okay. And the discussion on the massive editing policy is still not yet on Wikidata itself, is still outside, but there is not yet a draft of the request for comments.
There is a
but not on Wikidata. Not on Wikidata.
There's a draft, but it's not yet an RFC
Okay.
on Wikidata. Okay. Yeah, and if people want to help, please do let me know. I'm happy to invite you to refine the draft so we can take it.
I collaborated months ago, then a bit busy,
Yes.
maybe next month more. Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
Yes. Yeah, I know that you help write it more for everyone else. Because we need to get that over the finish line and then actually have the larger conversation on Wiki. Woogie.
Yeah, hello. I want to know if you are focused on Sparkle as a query language. Is that necessary, that a replacement? Or do you also think about other query languages or other? I think maybe there are, for different use cases, different options, the best way how to assess the data. I sometimes wondered when I saw the number of requests. You said in 1 minute, it seems as if a lot of this comes not from humans, but I'm not sure about that. But at least it seems to me that it's a very high number. So I think about maybe about other ways of assessing the data. Yeah, have you think about that too? To spreading it more and operating additional to the query service, another platform to assess data from Wikidata.
Yeah. Guillaume, you look like you want to add a response to this? Or?
I think there are two parts in this response, and one needs to come from you, one might need to come from me. So yes, we've been thinking for a very long time about other ways to access the data, and that's in part like Lydia was mentioning that page on guiding people on how to access the data depending on what you want to do. And there are the dumps, there are the REST API, there are many different ways already in terms of complex queries, programmatic graph-like access. There are not like that's a specific place here. At the moment, like the only solution we have for that is Sparkle. We have built so much as a community on top of Sparkle that it's probably difficult to transition to something else. So it's unlikely, but that's a question more for Lydia and for all the people on the call than for me. So it's unlikely that we can replace Sparkle by something else that works just as well. So there might be opportunities to add something on top of Sparkle. That might be Gremlin, that might be GraphQL. I mean, there are a lot of options there. And then it's a question of resources. Like, does it make sense to invest into another way to access the data that is similar to what we have if we don't replace it completely? Like, we're increasing the complexity both in terms of knowing what to use and in terms of maintaining the whole system. So it seems unlikely that this is something where we're going to invest at this point in time.
Yeah. In addition to what Guillaume said, when Ifra and I looked at a sample of queries that are being sent to the query service to better understand what's going on, there was a lot of automated queries from tools and so on that were basically just, for example, getting a label from a specific item in a specific language, or checking if there is a statement that connects two items and stuff like that. So we've been thinking about, okay, Sparkle is super powerful and it has its use, but not for everything that it's used for now. It's way too powerful and not needed to use it to just get the label of one item, right? That's what we have the REST API and the Action API for example. So thinking about how can we improve those so that the tiny missing pieces here and there are added to them so that they are actually a good replacement for those use cases, and then leave Sparkle for the stuff that really requires you to look at the graph and its connections and everything. All right, do we have more questions?
There is a hand raised, Lydia, from
Okay, go for it.
Yes, I want to ask about the mul versus like the language things, because as far as I've seen, there is a lack of like clarity on what exactly that does. So I thought like that one of the most viewed items is Q42 Douglas Adams. So like I had removed all the exact things as mul, but then we had some discussions with some people that didn't really go anywhere. So I want to ask, like, maybe as start to the new discussion, like, what are we supposed to do about this? Like, are we supposed to go ahead and remove everything that is the exact same with mul, or is it a case-by-case thing? And if so, what is the specific condition that we have to look out for?
Yeah. So in part, that's not my decision, but a community decision, which is why these discussions are ongoing, right? But I can tell you what the thinking behind it is, at least. And where I see some of the problems coming from right now. So let's take Q42 as a prime example. Douglas Adams is called Douglas Adams in a lot of languages. Not all of them, but a lot of languages. And is written in the same way in a lot of languages. So let's collapse that into mul and add explicit labels only where it differs from that as the general thinking. Or an item for an emoji or some Unicode, other Unicode symbol. Let's collapse that into mul and remove what's redundant then. Now there are things like, and this is, I think, what happened with Q42, where some reusers didn't use language fallbacks. So suddenly they didn't have a label because they relied on everything in Wikidata having an English label, which is not the case in the first place, but for everything that's important in some shape or form, that's probably true. And now suddenly it didn't have an English label. So one of the things I think we need to improve a bit in the communication is tell people about stuff like that, and tell them that Wikidata is not an English-only project, that we have stuff like language fallbacks, and in this case, then you would get a fallback to mul and have your Douglas Adams label. But yeah, I'm aware there are a few rough edges that need to we need to iron out. And yes, given you're right, I can stop sharing my screen. To finish that answer, at the end of the day, that's a community decision how exactly it's supposed to be used. I can tell you how it was intended and what the idea behind it is, but yeah. Yes, this seems like the right place to come to decisions.
Okay, thank you.
More questions? Okay, go for it.
Yes. What I want to know is a bit about the query service and the budget for it? Are you willing to invest more money into it, or do you want to stay on the same level? I think that's also an important thing. How much resources are available for further development of it?
My understanding is that the foundation is currently in the annual planning where stuff like this is being decided, but Guillaume...
That's above my pay grade. Like so my hope is that yes, we'll continue to invest in the query service or even more. It seems unlikely that we're going to spend a lot more resources than we are at the moment. But yeah, I'm the wrong person to ask, so I'm not sure. I think yeah, it's not really the question, the answer to the question you're asking, but my hope and plan is that we know the current situation is technically untenable. Like Blaze Graph is not the solution. We need to migrate away from that. So that's going to be our next project. The amount of resourcing doesn't change that this is going to be the next step. The amount of resourcing changes how long it's likely to take to execute that next step. So yeah, sorry, not probably not the answer you wanted, but I don't have the good answer.
Thank you, Ben. More questions? This is your chance, people. But if everything is clear and dandy, that's also great. All right. Andrea, please.
Okay, can you hear me? I just wanted to put in a plug for my session that's next, where I talk a little bit about combining, let me turn my camera on, talk a little bit about, I don't know why it's not working. Okay, there we go. Oh, sorry. I talk about combining search, combining Wikipedia kind of search with Wikidata, with the REST APIs, with WDQS to reduce my reliance on WDQS, on the query service, and fit within the timeline, the 30-second time windows that you have and things like that. I have all the open source. My code is open source, so the application that uses all that stuff. So I don't know if that helps, but I have found problems, using WDQS and especially even using search. But I do this for named entity recognition and linking and getting the aliases. And I use Mule because you don't always have an English fallback. So I have all of those kinds of examples in my talk.
That's an excellent plug for your session. So everyone go and attend Andrea's session in about 20 minutes. And after that, of course, Magnus' session on WikiFlix. I'm gonna wait another 10 seconds if anyone else has more questions or things they want to discuss. If not, Thank you so much, everyone. And if you have more questions, things you want to discuss, please do reach out to David, or me, ideally on the reported technical problem / Wikidata query service and search page. I will upload the slides with all the links to the program in a second. Thank you, everyone, and see you again in 20 minutes.
All right, then, yeah, welcome. And the next session for today is about using Wikidata to provide background information for application users. And I'm going to hand over to Andrea.
Okay, well, thanks, and hi, and I am going to go into slide share mode. There we go. Okay. And really this is about named entity recognition and linking and background information and combining the use of Wikipedia and Wikidata and the REST APIs and the query service to get all kinds of different information in different ways, and still fit within all the timing guidelines and everything that Wikidata query service requires. So let me see. Oh, there we go. So really, I'm using this in an application called Deep Narrative Analysis. It's all open source. It's Python. I already posted my slides, so you can link to it. It's on GitHub. And what I'm trying to highlight is not my application, but why this is really important to me. Because of the kinds of things I'm doing with deep narrative analysis. And like I said, it's the REST APIs, it's the query service. I also use geonames. I know people have mixed opinions about the value of geonames or not, but I personally like it. And if you're really interested in the code and what it does, take a look at the DNA subdirectory in GitHub in querysources.py. So it's all in Python. So what am I actually trying to do? I'm actually trying to analyze stories. I'm trying to analyze biographies, news stories, news articles, podcasts, all of these kinds of things. And this is more like a research tool. And understand, what is the story? How is it structured? How does it progress? Who's in the story? What's the story about? And the application can be tuned to look at different things that I'm trying to research or that people I'm working with are trying to research. It combines semantic kinds of things, ontologies, knowledge graphs, linguistic analysis, natural language processing, those kinds of things. And it also does a lot with LLMs and using the LLMs to parse the narratives. The end result of everything I'm trying to do is to create a bunch of knowledge graphs about the different articles, about their details that can then be analyzed in numerous ways. And not just like asking an LLM to do one thing and get one result, but compare articles over time, compare all the articles at a certain point in time, compare how an article talks about a person depending on the whether it's more conservative or it's more liberal or things like that. Do you use more masculine language or feminine language? All kinds of different aspects. And to really get a good analysis, you really have to understand who and what is being talked about, where it's happening, and all of those things. And that's the use, a huge use for the Wikipedia Wikidata. Also, similar to when you're reading like in a Nook or a Kindle or something and you don't recognize a word, you might highlight that word and get its dictionary, entry so that you can understand it. That's another use that I have for the Wikipedia Wikidata, to actually give people more information about a person or a place than what they might have. And so as you're looking at an article or looking at a snippet that's come out of it, and you don't understand something, that's the background data that's coming out of Wikidata and Wikipedia. And then because I have knowledge graphs, I can do inferencing and reasoning and all kinds of graph and network analyses. But that's not the important part for this presentation. So in terms of how I do the named entity processing, because that's kind of what I wanted to go over first, when you have a long article, LLMs get lost. They just get lost. They don't pull out everybody, and you know, they don't highlight all the named entities. But Spacy is really good at that. So I take Spacy, I break a document into sentences, and I let Spacy do its level of named entity recognition of a person. A NORP is a nationality, a religious group, a political group. That's what NORP is. An organization is like a business, a geopolitical entity, a country, a state, GPEs, locations, facilities, FACUS facilities, events like World War II or the Ukrainian War. Specific dates, it can talk about laws, products like your Apple phone, works of art, the Mona Lisa, those kinds of things. Those are the categories that come out of Spacy. And then to really be able to not just take one name, but be able to link across an article or a podcast. If you're talking about, you know, George W. Bush, you might talk about Mr. Bush or President Bush or Donald Trump or the Donald or whatever. You need to capture all these alternative names and all this kind of information about it. So when in a podcast they're, you know, making references, you can actually link all those references together. It's not just by a single name. And in addition, I always want to make sure I have a person's first and last names as alternate names, because sometimes in the aliases and the alt names in Wikidata, you don't always have both first and last name. Here's one example. Trump is an alias for Donald Trump, but Cameron is not an alias for David Cameron. So it's kind of important to be able to, you know, pull all those things out. So the processing just automatically does it. When you get the named entity out of Spacy, I just automatically go in and make sure I have first and last names. How do I kind of guarantee that I got the correct reference? For example, if you say the House and you're in the United States, it might be the House of Representatives. That's not always true, or you might just get house that it's a dwelling. So I actually, in my code, go and validate using the inheritance hierarchy in Wikidata that I've gotten at least a reference that's correct semantically, correct via the inheritance hierarchy and the subclassing. And then I also validate other items such as gender. You know, are you using a her pronoun or a him pronoun or a they pronoun? You can validate some of those things with the Wikidata as appropriate, obviously for people and not for facilities or stuff. Okay, because really right now, deep narrative analysis is focused on English, but my hope is to expand it out in the future for more things. The other thing that it does to try to make sure I have the right entity, you might be talking about multiple Trumps, Ivana Trump or Donald Trump or other things, or George W. Bush or George H.W. Bush. DNA keeps track of the most recent mention. So, and news articles and things like that are pretty good at being able to distinguish, so people can distinguish which Bush you're talking about or which Trump you're talking about, or, you know, which World War you're talking about. So DNA also tracks the most recent linking, so it can, if it's ambiguous, it'll say, well, my guess is going to be it's the most recent if I'm going to try to resolve or disambiguate an entity. Everything is stored as an RDF, in RDF turtle in a graph database, And so you have things, Douglas Adams, I know, is everything that people usually make reference to in Wikidata. Douglas Adams is a person in my ontology with a label, and then I have all the alternate names and it tracks all that. And so I can retrieve information via my REST APIs or Sparkle queries directed to the graph database. So that's kind of an overview. And let me jump into the examples. So here I created a fictional text, somewhat of a fictional text. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris were running on the Democratic ticket in 2024. The Biden-Harris campaign suffered setbacks. Nancy Smith Evans, I tried to do a hyphenated name, fictional name, reported on this. Smith Evans is a friend of she's not fried. I guess she's a friend. I spelled that wrong. Is a friend of Harris. Out of the spacey processing, you get 4 sentences. Obviously, it's pretty good at that. And those are the assignments that it made. That Joe Biden was a person, Kamala Harris was a person, Democratic was a NORP, 2024 was the date. It actually distinguishes for sentence 2 that Biden is a different person than Harris. Nancy Smith Evans, it created the compound name as a person, and then Smith Evans is another is the person, because I'm going with last names, first names, just to kind of show what actually happens in the news articles. And then from that, because I already know those things, so how do I get details out of this? I should have put a location in there. If it's a location, I first do a geoname search. I do some resolution of things. Like normally, if you're talking about Paris, you probably are referencing Paris, France, but there's also a Paris, Texas. So that if that's in the news article, it'll be Paris, Texas. The code combines it together to get Paris, Texas. So I get a better geonames result that's more correct. Just as a FYI to people, org is actually added as a possible location because sometimes Spacey incorrectly reports a location as an org. So I have some of these fix-ups in the code that I have found. The geonames query API that I use is there, and I can get the feature code, the country code, and everything. And I get alternate names, but then I also and you also get an explicit Wikipedia link if they have that defined in geonames, and I can use that directly. And from all of this information, I construct this noun dictionary where I'm keeping track of the most recent reference of things for the named entity linking and the RDF turtle. Okay, so if it's not a location, I try to find the information directly in Wikipedia. Search in Wikidata is hard. I don't always get the right results. It's hard to validate. You can't search really effectively in the Wikidata query service because I always time out. So I use the Wikipedia Action API. And I'm very much looking forward to the vector search, the similarity search. I think that was talked about yesterday. I'm very much looking forward to that. But right now I use the Action API, and there's the API call that I make. The surface form is really just the text. And then, I take out commas and fix things up. That's what the clean surface form means. And the first time I go through it, I kind of try to put in context, but for right now, I was doing political articles here. So and they were based in the United States. They were about the election. So I put in a country name. So for example, I will put United States House of Representatives as my clean surface form into that search, and it gets results. But if I put in United States Kamala Harris, that won't get any results. And so it's kind of a nice approach to tune, to provide the context of your articles. And you can change this because it's really just searching for Wikipedia articles that have that string in it, that start with that string. So for example, I got no results for United States Kamala Harris, so then I'll use just straight Kamala Harris. And you can clearly do either or. The problem with saying just House of Representatives is you get thousands of results because there's House of Representatives in Panama and in Chile and in other places. And it's too difficult to try and distinguish. So we're, especially for political things, appending or prepending the country really helps. This is what comes out of that open search. And you can see if you put in Kamala Harris, the kinds of labels you get out of it, and then the explicit Wikipedia links. Now, why do I do that? Because one, I'm going to keep track of all of these possible links depending on what a user might be interested in. But I'm really going to go after that first, the highest precedence link, and then use that to turn around and make another query using the Wikipedia path API. It's REST v1 path summary, to get a whole bunch more information directly from Wikipedia about the page and summarizing the page. So the kinds of information you get, I just checked that it's not a disambiguation page. And now I get the QID that's coming out of Wikidata. I have a really short description I can pop up in a UI. I have the explicit page that somebody could link to and I'll display in the UI. I have the abstract of it, so that there's an overview there, but then somebody could dig into the page further. And so you can see I'm kind of working my way into more and more explicit information. But now that I have the Wikibase, or the Wikipedia, Wikidata QID, I can go and query for more information out of WDQS, like what is the superclassing of the entity, and did I actually get the right entity? So you'll see I have a mapping of the QIDs. People, I really went to the top of the hierarchy, since some of the inheritance hierarchies are so deep. I didn't try to be an exhaustive list of everything that's in the Wikidata hierarchy. I try to say for a person, I'm going to look for a human. I'm also going to look, though, for an occupation or a position or a profession, because sometimes things get miscoded. And so, that queen, you've characterized somebody as an instance of a queen. Well, they're really a person who has the role of a queen, but sometimes they're mischaracterized. So I try to take this mischaracterization into account, or the fact that something like NORP is a nationality or an ethnic group or a political org or a political ideology or a religious group or a denomination. So you have multiple superclasses that I check against. Event, is it an occurrence? Is it a state? Is it a phenomenon? For a law, is it a law? Is it a rule? Is it a policy? Those all come back as laws. And so you see down at the bottom, I go and I actually do a Sparkle query. And so this is the Sparkle query for explicitly for instance of and possible superclasses. So instead of asking for all superclasses and to go across the whole tree, I just do a whole bunch of little queries that say, is this one of the superclasses? Is this one of the superclasses? Because there aren't that many, and that's why I'm at the top of the tree. I also get things like gender out of it. And then I continue to make separate queries. I don't try to do everything at once. I probably could, but I do separate queries. I get all the alternate names using the REST API for V1 entities, for items. I take the QID, I ask for its labels. I put in language tags. I currently check for both the Mule and the English tags, because that way it's easiest. And so I have all of that information. Or if it's an event, I ask for the start and the end dates of the event. When did World War II happen? When did the Ukrainian war start? Those kinds of things. So the query that I use there in that case is also listed down below. And so this would be an example of the alternate names, the alternate labels for Kamala Harris. Mamala, obviously that's kind of an insult there, but okay. All of her vice presidential titles, VP Harris, or the number, but you'll notice that Kamala isn't in this list of aliases. So automatically the DNA code will add that, or will add the last name if it didn't find Harris. And in this case, it didn't find Harris. So it would have added both Kamala and Harris as alternate names to enable the linking to happen later on, as there are references to Kamala Harris in the article. I did want to also highlight that there are some alternatives to this, and so there is something called Spacey Open Tapioca that was trained from the Wikidata dumps. Unfortunately, the live instance isn't functional any longer, and it only did person, loc, and org, and so I needed it to go broader. I needed it to do laws and everything. And from the paper, the Open Tapioca analysis said that they anticipated worse performance for broader domains. It worked best for scientific affiliations, which are very explicit. It didn't work very well on long texts. I of course, focus on these sentence level texts. But I don't know how, because of the live instance, I couldn't really compare and contrast. But I did want to mention that and say there are alternatives to the approach I've taken. But that's the presentation, and hopefully, yes, I got just a few more minutes.
Thank you very much. Are there questions for Andrea? We have 3 more minutes to go.
No questions? Anything interesting or curious you stumbled upon? It actually, Lydia, took me a while to refine to this technique of searching. I tried just, doing a kind of ugly search for, is there a matching Wikipedia page? I tried just WDQS. I actually have been extremely successful with the current approach I've taken. What I don't like is this need to append United States to the front, or things like that. But if I don't, the number of results you get back is so huge. The processing takes too long to disambiguate. It's actually kind of neat the way the REST APIs, both for Wikipedia and for Wikidata, can combine to yield these results.
Amazing. Thank you very much. There's another question. I'm going to just read that out. Is your approach assembled in a, in brackets, Python package?
I probably should do that. Right now, it's just kind of outlined. The different queries I do are outlined in my code. I probably should assemble it separately in a Python package that somebody could download and then just use. So that's a great suggestion. And that's something I'll do. I have a GitHub page about Wikidata and Wikipedia tools, and some papers I've written. And so I'll put a package up on there, and that's a great suggestion, because this is very, easy to use. It's a very well-defined path.
Amazing. Are there any other questions for Andrea? Because if not, we're at the end of our time, but I'm sure Andrea will be more than happy to answer questions by email or so. She's linked all her email addresses right there. Thank you for the super presentation. That was super insightful. I'm going to say that we take a 5-minute break and meet again at 19:30 CET for Magnus's presentation. Thank you all.
Bye.
is going to start now. And I am happy to hand over directly to Magnus so they can start talking about WikiFlix.
Okay, thank you very much. Happy to be here today. I'll talk about my tool WikiFlix, a free video streaming portal. And as much as I would like to lay claim to the ID and to the name, this is actually user Spinster who originally came up with the concept. So she made a page on Wikimedia Commons where she had some manually curated movies that were on Commons, just on a wiki page or several wiki pages assembled that people could watch actual cinema movies that are now in the public domain. And I came across it and I thought, hey, this could be automated and it could be a bit more streaming service like as we all know these things. So I had to look at Wikidata, and Wikidata has items about 34,000 films about that are in the public domain. So these would be free to share and to view. But it turned out only a fraction of those have the film as a video on Wikimedia Commons. Quite a few others had IDs could have had IDs for YouTube and Internet Archive, so I added a few more there. And I basically wrote a tool called WikiFlix, like the original page from user Spinster, that would aggregate all of these in an interface that will be quite familiar to everyone who uses Netflix. So fractions. We'll say so 35,000 items in total. If we have a look right now, I have 3,820. This is the state of today. So that's about 10%, which is not good, but it's not horrible either. I think, considering that I think many of these might be lost as well. Because they were lost to fires. Old movies were quite flammable in their original, and sometimes actually destroyed on purpose. Some studios destroyed them on purpose after they left the cinema, and because I get this data from Wikidata, there's also other information I can aggregate here. So about people, I have over 7,000 people who work either as an actor or as a director in any of these. I have about 450 sections, which is basically instance of or similar things, genre. Action movie, British movie, silent movie, all of these things. So there's quite a bit to explore here. So this would be a section, a science fiction film, which I have at the moment 94 movies in that section. And as always in these overviews, you get a thumbnail if there is one, as from Wikidata, or sometimes you can extract them from the actual movie. There is a movie title, obviously, the year if available, which it usually is, because in order to say it's public domain, you need to know the year. And for most of them, the play length is available. So I'll show this information here as an overview, and I'm sure you'll recognize a few of the classics here that have been around for a while and are now free to watch. I mean, some of them are quite old, but some are like from 1957, 51, 72. I see actually one here. So if we click on one of these, we see first quite a few links in this case to play it from Commons, to play it from Internet Archive, which are 2 versions there apparently, and 4 versions on YouTube. And you can essentially play them all from this interface with more or less convenience. Commons and Internet Archive, I think I have integrated. YouTube I tried to integrate, but I put a wrapper around it so it doesn't leak your private data if you view something there. We have information. We have the director and we have the cast from Wikidata. We have a description from Wikipedia if available. I'm using English here by default. I think if your browser language changes, it tries to check the Wikipedia for your browser language first. And it also pulls from Wikidata if available if the Bechtel test is a yes or a no. If you don't know this, it's if a movie has at least one scene with 2 women who talk about something other than a man. Perhaps not surprisingly, Nosferatu here fails this test, but I think that will probably be for most of these movies from this age here. If you then click on an actor, for example, here Max Schreck, you get again the description from Wikipedia and the Wikidata link, of course, an image if there is one, and the movies this person has worked in as an actor or as a director. You can also see the movies that are from a specific year. And the oldest one I have here in WikiFlix is from 1874, which is a 5-second movie made from individual still images from the transit of Venus across the sun. So these very old ones are always quite simple and short, but they do grow in length and quality, I think, quite quickly with the 1900s. Now, how is this happening? So I wrote this tool, and this tool has its own database where it essentially caches information from Wikidata, and in this database it keeps the films that you just saw on WikiFlix. It also keeps all the other items that don't have a video yet. We'll see that in a bit. This is updated automatically once every hour, which I think is a decent compromise between the need to see your latest edition on WikiFlix and server load. On every update, I also generate the main page, and every time I choose a random subset of sections, because I have, as I said before, about 450 sections, and I can't put them all on the main page, and I didn't want to manually choose what to put there, so I thought variety is the spice of life, so I just grab a random subset, which sometimes is quite interesting to see. I always have 4 sections hard-coded in there. There is recently edited, which is recently added on Wikidata. So if you change information on one of these movies, it will show up there as, oh, there's something new, maybe something interesting, just to keep things fresh a bit. Then there is highly ranked, which is actually the number of site links of the Wikidata item. So movies that I've written about quite a lot will rank higher here, which is, I think, a decent placeholder for how interesting a movie is, or how relevant a movie is in at least a historical context. There's most viewed, which is just an internal counter from the tool, basically how often a play page to actually play the movie was loaded for a movie. And then upon request, someone asked me to show a section with female directors. And there is no direct way to encode this in Wikidata, which is okay. So I hard-coded this section in there to give female directors a chance, which is, given the age of most of these movies, it's quite a surprising amount, I find. We have more. So as I said, this database, internal database, also has a list of all the films that don't yet have a video. And I also run in the background searches against Wikimedia Commons and the Internet Archive for the movie and year. So I show all these candidate movies here, and you can go through them. It has some information about the year, the play lengths were available, and the number of sites. This is language, Wikipedia language versions of articles, and some search buttons for the 3 video services I'm using here. And some of these have red X's or green check marks, which means an automated search has already found this on this site, which might or might not be the actual movie. Sometimes it's very specific, sometimes it's a very generic movie title. So one needs to go there and check manually. And if you find it, you can click on the movie link to Wikidata and add this either the Commons video or the YouTube or Internet Archive ID for this movie. There is, by request, a blacklist for movies. So initially, I just presented all movies as they are according to these metrics, as I said before. But it turns out WikiFlix is it's more for entertainment. It's where you go to watch a movie, and there were some movies, including the Triumph of the Will, which is the original propaganda movie of the Nazis, which is of historical interest, of course. But it ranked very prominently because it has so many Wikipedia articles associated. And it always showed up as a very prominent thing. And so there's a community changeable blacklist of, I think, 6 movies now, which are technically in the database, but they are not, they don't show up in the sections and they don't show up in the search results. So they can't be gotten too easily. You can go to Wikipedia, of course, or to Wikidata to learn about them. But here they have been hidden because it's a slightly different focus than Wikidata in general. Gray listed, okay, things to talk about. I think if you highlight them in some way, even if gray listed, maybe it gives them again some prominence. Yeah, all things we can talk about at some point to find the perfect way to deal with this. Here for now, it's just hidden, but it's actually in the internal database and treated like all the other movies. You can log in basically by logging into Wikidata through the tool. And at the moment, the only thing you can do is you can tag movies as favorites, and you get a favorites list, so you can browse, tag some movies, and maybe watch them later if you want. Not really a killer feature, I have to say, but for now, that's what it is. I also want to mention the other tool that uses the exact same code base, just with some configuration changes, WikiVibes, which I'm not going to show here. This is for audio, basically for music, but also for well, other audio recordings. It's not quite as fine-tuned as this one here, so there would be some work to be done. It has more audio files, I think, than WikiFlix actually, but it's not quite as streamlined. And just to show, because I think many people might think, oh yeah, this is just a bunch of 5-minute movies from the 1800s or something. No, actually, of these 3,800 films, 1,300 are play lengths of 1 hour or more. So it's actually, there are a few quite watchable films on the tool, I think. And that's the end of my presentation. And yeah, thank you all for listening.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Magnus. That was super helpful. Are there any questions to Magnus? As usual, you can just write them down. Lydia already has a very important question. What is your movie recommendation?
Well, as we have a great vision for Wikipedia and Wikidata, maybe Plan 9 from Outer Space can teach us how to not make a plan to achieve that. So that might be quite helpful there.
I can also recommend watching Shri 420, which is a Bollywood movie, very old, and has one of the most popular Bollywood actor and actress of their time.
Nice.
Another question, and I'm going to read that out for Magnus and also for the recording. Do you plan autoplay audio files like they do in SoundCloud? That is, do you get a stream of music?
So I assume that refers to WikiVibes for the audio. As I said, it's not really as fine tuned yet on WikiFlix. You have to essentially click on play in a little iframe for the respective source. I'm sure if I find some time to beef up WikiVibes, I can, at least for comments, find a way to play these things directly. So yeah, and for audio, I think there's a more need for playlists, which is something I don't have in WikiFlix because it doesn't really apply to the type of movies I have there. Yeah.
All right. Then we'll move to the next question, as long as the other one was satisfactorily answered. If there aren't any follow-ups, yes.
So about the video unavailable, well, I need to see this in detail. That would be a message from the upstream service. So I don't know if I can say if it's just blocked or not there. I think in any case, then if you want to invest a bit of work, maybe go to the Wikidata item and check the IDs of YouTube and Internet Archive respectively. If those work, it might just be some technical issue with the upstream source.
Okay, any more questions? We have around 4 more minutes to go. Any other installations is a question to you, Magnus.
If there's other installations, not that I know. The code is open source. The configurations files might need some documentation, but should be readable in principle. So I think with minor modifications, it could run anywhere, but it does require at least Wikidata as a backend. I guess you could use another Wikibase installation as a backend, but you need to change all the hard-coded properties and so on. It does look for Wikidata-like modeling of data. So that's kind of a requirement, but in principle, it's all open source and you can use it however you like.
Any more questions? Also, praises are very welcome. I'm going to give us maybe 10 to 30 more seconds. There's a question. Would be nice to know if Wikibase Cloud could be used to serve links of videos in social media, if I'm reading that correctly.
So I think definitely could be done as a separate installation. If it's just files that are uploaded there to include in WikiFlix, if we have a Wikidata property, it would be quite easy to add that. But yeah, if you it could read a new installation of the code. Could read from another Wikibase, including Wikibase Cloud. It might need some modifications to understand how the data is managed there, unless you happen to make the properties and everything exactly as they are on Wikidata. But yeah, in principle, that would work.
Another question is, is there also a plan to add subtitles to the movies on WikiFlix?
So I am basically using the built-in player for this. I don't actually know an example on WikiFlix for a movie with subtitles, so I can't even test that. It's not something I would necessarily build. Maybe I need to start the viewer with some other options. That's a possibility. But this is more, I think, a question of what's in the video file than how I display this. I don't think I'll end up writing code to show subtitles there. But yeah, in principle, if we have an example, I'm happy to have a look if I can enable subtitles there.
Any last questions to Magnus? If there's nothing, I'm going to, again, thank you very much for the super cool presentation. It was really nice to see how you came up with this and how all the work that you put in. And for everyone else, I'm going to say thank you for being here, for asking questions. And again, a huge thank you to the presenters for presenting their work and answering the questions. I'm going to also plug the sessions for tomorrow. There's they also start at 1700 UTC, and tomorrow's all about some really cool tools and applications that have been built using Wikidata's data. So come share support, ask questions, yeah, and we'll be super happy to see you there as well. Yeah, thank you for being here. Have a wonderful evening and rest of your day. And we'll see you hopefully tomorrow.